All right. We've got Rod in British Columbia. How you doing?
Hi, Matt. Hi, Tracie. How you guys doing?
Hello.
Pretty good.
Good. I'm a first-time caller. I've been listening to your show for about 4 years, and it's been a real big help to me accepting my own unbelief. So I wanted to thank you for that right up front.
Oh, thanks for saying so.
Yeah. What I wanted to talk about is it's kind of a heavy subject for me, but I want to kind of dig into it a little bit. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I have some pretty vivid memories of my early experiences being sort of indoctrinated into Christianity. And
the particular denomination, or
up here in Canada, it's the Pentecostal Assemblies of Canada.
okay.
And so, yeah, kind of one of the wilder denominations that I've experienced. But my experience goes back to when I was 4 years old, and I was basically pressured by my family into making, a confession of faith, even though my gut feeling was that this was wrong. Like, I didn't like the idea that I had to confess that I was a sinner or that there was anything wrong with me without something being, actually wrong with me. And it went out, like, it was a course of like 6 months before I finally gave in to my family's pressure, and I pretty much, after that, I kind of forgot my original position. I forgot that I was really against this from the beginning, and I ended up spending my entire life, even into my adulthood, just trying to please other people, just trying to please God, just trying to be what everybody else wanted to be. And about 4 years ago, it was actually a Christmas morning when I was 4 that I made that statement of faith. And Christmas 4 years ago, the memory came back to me so vividly that I instantly realized that I didn't believe in God even from the start.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, it's just really emotional to talk about. I eventually talked to my parents about this situation, how it started with me, and I let them know that I didn't believe in a God, and they were okay with that. I mean, they said that I'm a grown adult and I'm free to make my own choices, which I am, and whatnot. But and they said that they still love me and whatnot. But then the next day, I got a very curt email from my dad telling me that he doesn't appreciate me blaming them for choices I made when I was 4. And ever since then, our relationship has been on the rocks. And
So they're fine with it, and they love you, and yet they don't want you to blame them for decisions you made when you were 4.
Yeah.
Have you made a list of other decisions you made when you were 4 to see how much impact they might have had on those decisions?
Exactly. Like, come on, what 4-year-old really understands the impact of making decisions?
None of them.
No. And
although you seem to have understood it better at 4 than I did.
Yeah.
Because if it took them some time to kind of wear you down to where you didn't necessarily feel right about this, I had been so thoroughly surrounded by all of this that when I walked down the aisle at the revival, all I can remember, and it's not, I was probably 5, was that this was the right thing to do. I mean, there was not really any question or concern, and I think for me it was, and yours may have been similar, but it was more about, this is what's expected of me. This is what my family is looking for, and it's like you watch parents watch their kids, and when their kid does something that they think is good and they're proud of them, their faces light up, even if they don't say anything, and it's all obvious. And when you're in a church,
and as a child, you just eat that up.
Yeah, it's your entire purpose for living. Quite often is, let me get approval from these people. And when you're in a church in this environment and you're walking down the aisle because you've been convinced that this is the right thing to do, you're not just getting that from your parents. There's a smiling preacher at the end of the aisle, and there's all these people in the pews who are like, "Oh, look at the cute little kid who is ready to take Jesus into his heart."
Yeah, and they're all celebrating over it. And for me, like what you described is a little different. Like for me, it was the pressure. It was the longing for acceptance. But I said that prayer through gritted teeth, through resentment.
Mm-hmm.
That was my attitude, and I knew I was sacrificing myself somehow, and I paid the price for it dearly. Like, I'm in my mid-30s, and my life is in shambles right now because everything I've lived for has been falsehood. I've lived my entire life out of wanting to please others and not really understanding and living by my own conscience. And in trying to relay this to my parents, it's really caused a lot of problems. And, they've just recently, my dad, about 6 weeks ago, he told me he has nothing more to say to me. And, there's other issues that have been going on, like he has PTSD from years in the police force. And that's had he and I had some pretty horrible years before I left home. But I'm at the point now where, I'm really needing to get some firm grounding under me about what's fair in this situation. Is it fair to hold a 4-year-old to a life-altering choice like that, or can I say to my parents, hey,
well, one of the things that's worth remembering is that they were probably victims of this as well. Not to say that they don't bear some responsibility, but I don't fault my parents for teaching me what they honestly believe to be true. I don't they are victims of this kind of religious indoctrination as well, and actually far worse off than I am because I've managed to make it through. There are, by the way, lots of resources that are becoming available for people in your position, including Recovering from Religion. There's a group and a website.
Yeah, I've heard of them. You guys mention them a lot.
And Dr. Marlene Winnell and others have talked about religious trauma syndrome, and there's various counseling services. There's also the Secular Therapist Project, which is kind of a sub-branch of Recovering from Religion, where you can find therapists to talk to you about issues you're having who aren't going to direct you toward religion and gods and claims like that.
Yeah.
But
I agree with what you said. Like, my parents obviously were, they both grew up Catholic, and they sort of left the faith a little bit in their young adult years, and before they kind of got together, they decided on the Pentecostal church.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel it's still within my right to hold them responsible for their actions, even though they had the same background. Just like if I had never become an atheist and I had kids and I did the same thing to them, with what I know now, I would hold myself responsible for indoctrinating my children. I can't say, right now I'm also processing a lot of stuff with my dad where his PTSD led him to treat me unfairly throughout my entire teenage years.
Yep.
I understand that PTSD is behind that, but I have to hold him responsible for treating me unfairly because it's had a destructive impact in my life. So I'm trying to find a balance here, and I'm kind of at a place where my relationship with the parents is starting to become less important in my life anyway. But
and it's especially difficult because quite often it doesn't seem like there's any likelihood of change when you're dealing with people who are much older, who have been subjects to indoctrination and have been involved in this for that long, and who are suffering from other issues like PTSD. It may appear hopeless. Like, I have no reason to think that my parents are ever going to stop believing their religion. That just doesn't even seem possible.
Yeah. And that's what I know about them. Never even crossed my mind. My parents are so set in their ways that I don't think I could ever convince them.
And if that's the case, then while certainly they are the person, they are the people who bear responsibility for the indoctrination they put you through, recognizing, number one, that they are also victims of that as well, and number two, that it's unlikely that they're ever going to change their mind or see it this way, can be helpful in dealing with them. It's kind of in the realm of forgiveness, where I know you've wronged me, and I view it as you actually doing something that has wronged me, but I understand that there are circumstances that aren't going to allow you to recognize this and take responsibility for it, but I'm now moving past it. You're not going to be able to wrong me anymore for it, and now that I've said my piece about how I viewed this issue, I'm more likely to look at them with pity and compassion for what they're going through than just
Yeah.
the anger of what happened.
Yeah, that seems to make sense. And another thing that's on my mind in respect to this general topic of childhood indoctrination, I've listened to your debate with Cy about a dozen times now, and
Wow, that's enough. You shouldn't do that.
hey, that was his suggestion, and I tell you, every time I listen to it, I understand your position more. I'm actually learning from how you present, your arguments. So I kind of agree. Like, Cy is kind of painful to listen to, but my point I'm getting to is that, the arguments that he makes, like, I mean, you know what they are. I can't even relate his arguments, but no child comes to a confession of faith through these kind of, philosophical arguments. It's ridiculous.
There is, though, a subtle version, a variation of Cy's argument that I think is used as part of the indoctrination, and that's when you convince someone that they already know that God exists and that they know that they're a sinner, where you're exploiting the guilt that you have infused in them to claim that what's really happening here, rather than that they have been taught to feel guilty, is that they are recognizing that they are intrinsically guilty. I think that is something that can be used.
Yeah.
Now, nobody's ever, I don't think, like the transcendental argument for the existence of God, you're not going to find anybody who believed in God because of that.
Yeah.
Let alone a 5-year-old.
You're right. It's more of a dumbed-down version for kids.
Which is funny to say that there's a dumbed-down version of Cy's argument, but evidently there is.
Yeah, you got a point there. But it's between that and a very spectacular power imbalance between parent and child, where a child is almost always willing to follow a parent's suggestions or directions, or, So I just, I'm sure the point's been made before, but yeah, I mean, I really appreciate the way you guys take on these really bad arguments from theists, but every time I want to tell a theist, these are the arguments that won me over.
Yeah. And I appreciate you sharing your story, Rod. I know it's not always easy. It's a type of thing that I think probably more people need to hear, and we should be engaged, in sharing our stories. Once again, take a look into Recovering from Religion, the Secular Therapist Project. Try to, keep yourself mindful that things will probably improve in time. One of the things, with my parents is that we never got back to normal, but we did get to a new normal, where these are people who, they know you, they've loved you all these years, and they're the ones who are going to have to deal with this conflict between, I know this person to be a good person who I raised and loved, and yet my religion is telling me that they're working for Satan and leading people to hell and that I should have nothing to do with them. And that's going to be a difficult struggle for them as well. So it's one of those things, you've got to do what's right for you. Some of the best suggestions are to give the people in your life time. Dan Savage recommends a year to let them ask all the silly questions and repeat things over and over again. And then after that, it's shape up or ship out. And for my own health, I either need us to come to some new normal, some new understanding of how the relationship's going to be, or I'm going to need to remove you from my life because I don't need another negative influence. I need people who care about me for me.
Yeah, I hear you.
Well, thanks a lot for calling, Rod. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for your time, guys.
Bye-bye.